Jim MacVeagh's burst of laughter came so unexpectedly, his hand jiggled the stem of the wine-glass, and a splash of champagne spotted the linen tablecloth. Sidney Carper, the Secretary of Defense, sitting on his right, grinned in shared appreciation and shook his head. "Unbeatable, isn't he, Senator? He just won't be topped." "Nobody can touch him when he's determined," agreed MacVeagh. He wiped at his eye with a corner of his napkin and turned back toward the center of the long head table, cluttered with late debris of ashes and crumpled menus amid the sparkle of glassware. The speaker, President Mark Hollenbach, was mock solemn again after flashing a responsive smile for the spray of laughter which greeted his first sally. His was the honor chore of the night, the brief reply to the toast to the President of the United States, which signaled the closing of another annual gridiron dinner. The newspaper correspondents had lampooned the Hollenbach administration and its foes in a series of musical skits, some sharp as stilettos, but one belabored in its buffoonery, while the Marine Band Orchestra, in shining scarlet coats, played for the 550 diners. Behind the president hung the emblem of the club which had satirized every White House occupant since Benjamin Harrison. It was a huge, illuminated, rose-festooned gridiron, patterned on the type used by 19th-century housewives for roasting over a wood fire. Before Hollenbach sat the elite of America's delicately interwoven political-industrial society, the men who ran the political parties and the big corporations. These were men whom, for the most part, the president called by their first names. They were mellowed now by the whiskey and wines, the terrapin and the filet mignon Chateaubriand, yet they sat watching him attentively, in the manner of that always vigilant breed, the president-watchers. Yes, he was on trial, as ever, and the long rows of roses and daffodils, the shimmering silver in wine-glasses, the amiable droop of white ties and once stiff shirt bosoms did not deceive him. It was 11 p.m., and the faces turned toward him beamed like pumpkins on a vine. The men of wealth thought the fair deserved well of them, and even those who had rented their white tie and sails for $15 shared a sense of well-being. It was at just such an hour of camaraderie that an average man would lower his guard. But not President Hollenbach. He could never afford to be bested. "As you know," he resumed, "one of my closest advisers is renowned for his abstinence." He paused. Timing was of the essence in a speech of witticisms. "The worst part about being a teetotaler like Joe is that when he gets up in the morning, he knows he already feels as good as he's going to feel all day." Another roll of mirth. Mark Hollenbach smiled, and Jim MacVeagh thought he detected a touch of vindication in the smile. The gag was an old one, used years before by Governor George Romney of Michigan, and MacVeagh knew that Hollenbach's speechman had tried to dissuade him from using it. But Hollenbach ruled that it would sound fresh on the lips of a president. It did. MacVeagh glanced again at Sidney Carper beside him, but the Secretary of Defense was not smiling. Instead, he seemed absorbed in a study of the president. Carper's huge head, with the prominent beak and the bronze tint of the skin, reminded MacVeagh of a profile of an American Indian. He had to crane his neck to get an unobstructed view of the president past Carper. "I am delighted to be here this evening," said President Hollenbach, "and hear the nation's leading newspaper men tell the truth about me, for a change." More laughter. Hollenbach kept his face blank this time. "I was especially heartened to see my friends, the Republicans, laughing. They don't often succumb to attacks of good humor, you know. Of course, tonight, they never quite got around to laughing at themselves. For a Republican to laugh at himself requires a severe psychological upheaval. Still, tonight they laughed at me, and that's a start. After all, they have to begin somewhere. I have great faith in this country, and I'm confident that someday, somewhere, somehow, a Republican is going to break out in a big, hearty guffaw just for the fun of the thing."